Chapter 51. Using magic to settle an IOU? Is he trying to curse his debtor to death or create counterfeit notes? I might not have a solution to the problem, but I can finish you instead. All sorts of thoughts appeared in Klein's mind as he looked at old Neil with an oddly. He seriously considered the possibility of calling the cops. Noof informing the Nighthawks. Old Neil shot a glance at him and said, peeved, I can see ignorance, foolishness, and the weak and shameless disbelief in your eyes. Didn't Dunn tell you the maxim of the mystery priors? Do as you wish, but do no harm. Although this maxim originated from the secret and evil Moses Ascetic Order organization, Beyonders who choose the path of Moses Ascetic Order have proven that it's right through their own experiences. As long as one strictly abides to it and shows the needed fear and reverence, the risk of losing control will be minimized. The contrary has similarly been established. Your suspicion towards me is an insult to mystery priors. Sorry. Klein did not hesitate to apologize. He had indeed forgotten that Dunn Smith had once mentioned the maxim. Old Neil was not truly angry. In a blink of an eye, he chuckled. A pity very few Beyonders choose to be seers. There is no corresponding maxim to help you, but I have Emperor Roselle's diaries. Yes, strictly abiding to the maxim has a hint of acting. Klein suddenly came to this thought as he nodded as if in deep thought. Old Neil did not continue. He removed the vases and other items from the round table and placed them in a corner. Immediately following that, he took out both a crimson red and black candle from the silver chest. He explained, if ordinary people attempt ritualistic magic, they have to follow the results from astromancy or read corresponding manuals. They have to choose suitable dates and times, for example, the day representing the goddess, the period when she rules over the moon. But for us Beyonders, especially Beyonders good in this domain, there's no need for that. Our acute spiritual perception and potent astral projections are key, of course. If you are not confident about the ritualistic magic you are attempting, it's best to choose a suitable date and time. It can increase the probability of success. Alright. This is based on a premise. Remember carefully to abide strictly by the rules. Old Neil placed 2 candles and turned to the side and looked at Klein, saying very solemnly, low sequence Beyonders are not strong enough. Almost all the ritualistic magic they can perform are the seeking of external powers and help. Therefore, you can only consider orthodox divinities like the goddess or the Lord of Storms. Absolutely do not attempt to communicate with the unknown or unpredictable existences, even if people believe in them or the promises recorded are filled with enticements. Believe me, don't take any chances. As long as you attempt once, you will go down a slippery slope into the abyss with no return. Any work or resistance will only slow it down with no way to change the trajectory. Remember. Klein said in a deep voice. However, he felt a little afraid. My luck enhancement ritual has apparently sought power from an unknown and unpredictable existence. Furthermore, I have gained powers capable of pulling people into the fog that even a senior Beyonder like the Hanged Man finds unbelievable. Well, at least I think he is a senior Beyonder. Thankfully, I haven't gone mad or have any signs of losing control. While worrying over this, he proactively changed the subject. So, Nighthawks should seek the help of the goddess? No one will stop you if you pray to the Lord of Storms. However, we are unable to tell from our ritualistic magic whether he replies with malicious intent or not. The outcome will be distorted in unpredictable ways. Old Neil successfully made Klein give up the idea in a joking manner. There was no so-called best, only necessary. After his exhortations, Old Neil picked up a crimson red candle and said, by using candles made of moonflowers and dark red sandalwood, it will represent the goddess identity as Lady of Crimson in the ritualistic magic. He pointed to the black candles and said, candles made of night vanilla and slumber flowers represent the night. As he spoke, he placed the black candle on the top left end of the round table while the red candle was placed on the top right end. Why do we symbolize the goddess with only 2 candles? She is also the mistress of calm and silence, empress of disaster and horror, and mistress of calm and silence. Old Neil chuckled. That's right, this is something I wished you asked. Before their fall, the Moses Ascetic Order had a very good relationship with the church. Their beliefs and results on ritualistic magic have heavily influenced us. They believe that all objects are numeric. Every number has a spirituality, and in ritualistic magic, 0 represents the unknown or chaos. It symbolizes the state of the universe before it was born. 1 represents a beginning, the first creator. 2 represents the world and various divinities that were produced from his body. 3 represents contact between divinities and material objects to create all things. Here, using 2 candles represents the goddess, while the 3rd candle is for you. Which two candles and which two symbols to have depend on the intended effects of ritualistic magic. 3 begets all things. 1. All things stem from 3. Klein could not help but recall certain things from his previous life. Seeing Klein listen attentively, old Neil took a third candle and said, "This is the candle representing me. It's a very ordinary candle which only has a little bit of mint added. Take note that plants like roses, lemons, mint, moonflower, night vanilla, and slumber flower are beloved and cherished by the goddess, viewing it from another angle. The 3 candles represent the bodies, spiritualities, and godhood of every person." After finishing the description, old Neil placed the third candle in the middle of the round table. He then took out a bottle of concocted full moon essence oil, a huge cauldron engraved with the dark sacred emblem, a silver knife with gorgeous patterns, a cup of water, and a saucer of coarse salt. To beyonders who are not good at ritualistic magic, there is a need for bells, crystal balls, silver cups, incense, or other supplementary items. However, mystery priors and seers have no need for that. These artifacts are already sufficient. Old Neil placed the fake goatskin parchment with the IOU just below the cauldron and used a special quill to hold down one corner. He turned to Klein and said, "Ritualistic magic needs a clean spiritual environment where you will not be disturbed, and that requires us to create it. The steps are to first enter cogitation, focus your mind, and with the supplementary items, draw out our strength and construct it around us." For example, Ray Bieber's house had used holy night powder while it'll be using a ritual silver dagger. Throughout the entire process, we have to go according to the outcome we desire to confirm the symbolism and corresponding incantation. Incantations are best done in Hermes because ancient Hermes stemmed from nature. It's akin to ancient Dragonish and ancient Elvish. The effects are very direct, lacking the necessary concealment and protection. It easily causes the caster to fall into danger. This is also why it has been modified. However, it's more effective. Alright, I have to focus on the ritualistic magic. I won't explain things to you any further. Pay attention by watching and listening. Remember any problems and ask me when everything is done. Alright, Klein took 2 steps back and trained his eyes on old Neil. Old Neil's eyes rapidly darkened as invisible wind around him spun. He was silent for a moment, going from left to right, then up to down, using his psyche to cause friction and consecutively light up the 3 candles. Following that, he picked up the silver knife and stabbed it into the coarse salt. Then he chanted in Hermes, "I sanctify you, blade of pure silver. I cleanse and purify you, allowing you to serve me in this ritual. In the name of the Evernight goddess, the Lady of Crimson, you have been sanctified." After a short but powerful syllable, old Neil drew a silver knife and inserted it into a cup of clear water. Then he raised it and pointed to the space beyond the round table. He aimed the blade tip in the periphery and took a step forward, circling the round table. Every step he took made Klein feel an invisible energy spew out of the silver knife. It was filled with spirituality as it connected with the air, forming a completely sealed wall. After walking 1 round, the altar was completely isolated from its surroundings. Old Neil stood in front of the round table and put the silver knife down. He picked up the bottle of full moon essence oil and dripped 3 drops on the black, dark red, and ordinary candles. Sizzle. A thin mist emanated as everything seemed to become veiled in mystery. Old Neil put down the glass bottle and looked at the fake goatskin parchment silently for 2 minutes. Then he picked up the quill and drew a marquee contralita square that framed all the content, indicating that he was in control of the debt. Following that, he drew another cross, indicating that it was cancelled. Upon reaching this step, he picked up the parchment with one hand and tapped his glabella with the other to activate his spirit vision. Another invisible and exuberant energy bloomed as old Neil whispered a chant. "I pray for the power of the dark night. I pray for the power of the crimson. I pray for the goddess loving grace. Please provide me with the funds to pay this IOU. Night vanilla, an herb that belongs to the red moon, please bestow your powers to my incantation. Moonflower, an herb that belongs to the red moon, please bestow your powers to my incantation." Klein was completely flabbergasted listening from the side. All sorts of thoughts arose in him. Such an incantation can work? Although it was recited from written Hermes, isn't this way too simple and down to earth? Wouldn't the goddess be angry and multiply the debt severfold? At that moment, the candlelight lit up suddenly. After old Neil finished his incantation, he closed his eyes for 2 minutes. He picked up the full moon essence oil and dripped 1 drop onto each of the 3 candles. Immediately following that, he grabbed the parchment and pulled it close to the candle representing me. When it ignited, he immediately threw it into the cauldron. Old Neil closed his eyes again as he seemed to sense the burning of the IOU. He opened his eyes after a moment and looked toward the black sacred emblem on the cauldron. The parchment was already completely incinerated. Praise the lady. Old Neil tapped his chest in 4 spots, forming the shape of the crimson moon. Then he extinguished the candles in the opposite order as he lit them. After finishing everything, he used the silver knife to rip apart the invisible wall around him. A huge wind stirred immediately as Old Neil heaved a sigh of relief. It's done, that's it? Klein asked in a daze. Has the IOU been settled? How? I don't know either. Anyways, it will be settled in a reasonable manner, said Old Neil with a smile as he threw up his hands. Klein was unsure what expression or words to use as a response. Isn't this a little unreliable? This is a Taoism saying. Tao begets 1, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, 3 begets all things. Chapter 52. Stop thinking about the bloody IOU. Let's discuss the ritualistic magic. Old Neil put away the candles, cauldron, silver knife, and other items with a relaxed expression. Klein really wanted to shrug his shoulders like the Americans in his previous life, but ultimately could not bring himself to do something that ungentlemanly. He turned his focus toward the ritualistic magic and threw out detailed questions that puzzled him. Receiving answers from them, for example, the incantations had a particular format. As long as they were satisfied and the key meaning was expressed in Hermes, the rest could be left to one's creativity. Of course, blasphemy or disrespectful descriptions were absolutely forbidden. The mysticism class lasted until noon. Before Old Neil coughed twice. We have to return to Zutland Street. With that said, he grumbled in an indistinct manner, to get these bloody materials. I missed my beloved breakfast. Klein looked around both amused and puzzled. Mr. Neil, do you have a chef? Or a maidservant in charge of cooking? A weekly salary of £12 could hire several servants. According to the newspapers, with board and lodging provided, hiring an ordinary chef cost anywhere between 12 to 15 soldi a week. It did not even need £1. A maidservant to do miscellaneous chores was even cheaper. Their weekly salaries ranged between 3 soldi 6 pence to 6 soldi. Of course, one could not bear any hope of them having any culinary skills. That's not right, with Mr. Neil's debt of £30. It's only normal he doesn't hire any chefs or servants, it seems. I've asked another question I should not have asked. While Klein regretted his question, Old Neil shook his head without minding it. I often attempt ritualistic magic, research extraordinary items, and read corresponding documents at home. So I don't know, is it possible that I hire ordinary people as chefs, butlers, or maidservants? I only hire someone to clean up the place regularly, and if they are not ordinary people, do you think they will be willing to do such jobs? I seem to have asked a silly question. It's possibly because I will not do anything that involves mysticism at home, explained Klein in a self-deprecating manner. Old Neil had long stood up, wore his round felt hat, and while walking out the door, rambled on. I seem to smell pan-fried foie gras. Once the IOU is completely settled, I'll definitely have one set. For lunch, I'll definitely eat roasted pork glazed with apple juices. No, that's not enough. I must have a sausage infused with mashed potatoes. You are making me hungry. Klein swallowed his saliva as he caught up to Old Neil and headed for the nearby public carriage stop. After returning to Zutland Street, Old Neil suddenly grunted after stepping down the carriage. What do I see? Goddess, what am I seeing? He was suddenly as nimble as a 17 or 18-year-old lad. He quickly came to the roadside and picked up an item. Klein leaned close out of curiosity and looked carefully. He realized it was a wallet with fine workmanship. With his lack of experience, he could barely tell if the dark brown wallet was made of buffalo skin or sheepskin, but he noticed a small light blue logo embroidered on the side of the wallet, a white dove spreading its wings as if ready to take off. That was Klein's first impression. The second thing he noticed was the stack of paper notes in the bulging wallet. There were more than 20 gray notes imprinted with black in gold pounds. Old Neil opened up the wallet and pulled out the notes. When he looked at it carefully, he immediately chuckled. 10-pound notes. The Honorable Founder and Protector, William I. Wow, goddess, there's a total of 30 notes. There's also a few 5-pound notes. £1 and 5 soldi notes, more than £300? That's a huge amount of money in every meaning of the word. I might not even earn that much in 10 years. Klein's breathing turned heavy involuntarily as the amount of gold pounds was immense. Picking up such a wallet was equivalent to picking up a briefcase of banknotes in his previous life. I wonder which gentleman dropped it. He can't be someone ordinary, analyzed Klein calmly. Such a wallet was clearly not a woman's. There's no need to care who he is, said Old Neil with a chuckle. It's not like we attempted to divine and take money that doesn't belong to us. We should wait here for a moment. I believe the gentleman will soon be back searching for it. It's not something that can be given up no matter who it is. Klein heaved a sigh of relief. He had a brand new understanding of Old Neil's morals. He was rather worried that he would have used the goddess bestowment as an excuse and paid off his debt. He was still wondering how to prevent it and persuade him otherwise. Is this do as you wish, but do no harm? Klein suddenly learned something new. The duo did not wait more than a minute by the streets when a luxurious four-wheeled carriage zoomed over. Its side had a light blue logo with a dove spreading its wings. The carriage stopped, and a middle-aged man dressed in a black formal suit with a bow tie of the same color alighted. He looked at the wallet, took off his hat, and said politely, "Sirs, that should be my master's wallet. Your logo is proof of everything, but I need to make additional verifications. This is to be responsible for all parties. Might I ask how much money is there in the wallet?" replied old Neil politely. The middle-aged man was taken aback as he said in a self-deprecating manner almost immediately, "As a butler, I do not know how much money master had in his wallet. Sorry, please permit me to ask." "As you wish." Old Neil gestured for him to do as he pleased. The middle-aged man walked to the carriage's side and through the window, conversed with the person within. He approached Klein and old Neil again and smiled. "More than 300 pounds. But less than 350 pounds, my master. Does not remember the exact number. Does not remember. That's really some filthy rich guy. If I had that much money on me, I would definitely be counting it again and again." Klein was filled with envy. Old Neil nodded and handed the wallet back with the goddess's proof. "This belongs to you." The middle-aged man took the wallet over and did an estimate before pulling out 3 10-pound notes. "My master is Sir Deweyville. He wishes to commend your morals. This is what an honest person should receive. Please do not reject it." "Sir Deweyville? The one who established the Deweyville Trust? The Sir Deweyville who provided cheap rental apartments to the working class?" Klein immediately remembered the name. He was a knight that his brother respected but did not believe was grounded in reality. "Thank you, Sir Deweyville. He is a kind and generous gentleman." Old Neil did not stand on ceremony as he received the 3 notes, after watching Sir Deweyville's carriage depart. He turned to look at Klein when he saw that there was no one around. He flicked the notes and chuckled. 30 pounds. The IOU is settled. I said it will be settled in a reasonable manner. This is the power of magic. Holy f***ing power of magic. That actually works?" Klein was once again flabbergasted. A few minutes later, he entered the building's stairwell and while heading to the security company, he asked puzzledly, "Mr. Neil, why didn't you ask for more money?" "Do not be greedy. One must take care not to be greedy when doing ritualistic magic. Temperance is a critical trait needed by every mystery prior if they wish to live long," explained old Neil happily. In a huge ballroom, candles were burning on a few chandeliers, emitting a fragrance that soothed the minds of people. By the sheer number of candles, they produced a light in no way inferior to that of gas lamps. There were long tables with pan-fried foie gras, grilled steak, roasted chicken, fried tonguefish, desi oysters, mutton stew, cream soup, and other delicacies. In addition, there were bottles of mist champagne, Ormer grape wine, and Southville red wine. They were all glistening with a tempting glow under the light. Servants in red vests carried trays with crystal cups and shuttled between the gentlemen and ladies dressed both elegantly or gorgeously. Audrey Hall was wearing a collared, high-waisted, pale white dress with engagiantes. Her corset was tightly fitted, while her voluminous layers were puffed up perfectly with a cage crinoline. Her long blonde hair was coiled up in an elegant bun and the earrings, necklace, and rings she wore sparkled brightly. At her feet were a pair of white dancing shoes that were stitched with roses and diamonds. "How many petticoats am I even wearing? 5? 6? Wearing white silk gloves. Audrey caressed her crinoline gently with her right hand. Her left hand was holding a glass of clear champagne. Audrey was nothing like her usual self, usually placing herself center stage of banquets and making her the focus of attention. Instead, she avoided the bustle and quietly stood in the shadows of hanging curtains by the French windows. She took a sip of champagne as she watched the crowd, as though she did not belong. "Count Wolf's youngest son is chatting with Viscount Conrad's daughter. He likes to move his forearm to reinforce what he says. The bigger the movement of his forearm, the more unbelievable his words. That is something gleaned from experience. He can't stop trying to elevate himself by putting other people down. However, he can't help but feel guilty. It can be seen by the way he talks and his body language." Duchess Della has repeatedly covered her mouth while laughing with her left hand today. "Ah, I see, she is showing off her pure ocean blue sapphire." Her husband, Duke Negan is discussing the current situation with a few conservative nobles. Since the banquet began, he has searched for Duchess Della once. They almost never make eye contact. Maybe they aren't as in love as they pretend to be. Baron Larry has made Madame Parnes laugh 7 times. That's very normal, nothing strange about it. But why does she look at her husband with guilty eyes? Oh, they have gone their separate ways. That's not right. The directions they are headed leads to the garden. In the extravagant banquet, Audrey saw many details she never noticed in the past. There was an instant where she nearly believed that she was watching an opera. Everyone is a good opera actor, she sighed silently as her eyes remained limpid. At that moment, she suddenly sensed something and turned her head. She cast her gaze onto a dark corner in the large balcony outside. In the shadows was a huge golden retriever sitting there silently. She was looking inside at Audrey while half her body was hidden in the darkness. Susie, the corners of Audrey's mouth twitched as her expression instantly changed. She could no longer maintain her state as a spectator. Chapter 53. An ancient 3-masted sailboat was navigating through a tumultuous storm in the sea. It was not fast and its displacement was lacking. With the weather and the sea looking like a cataclysmic scene, the sailboat was like a withered leaf separated from its tree. However, regardless of how the typhoons rampaged or how terrifying the waves were, it continued sailing peacefully without any signs of tilting. Alger Wilson stood on the empty deck as he looked at the massive waves that resembled mountains. His thoughts were a mystery. It's going to be Monday again, he muttered silently to himself. It was the day belonging to Mother Earth, the beginning of a series of waxing and waning. However, it meant something different to Alger. It belonged to a mysterious existence forever enveloped in grayish-white fog. At least I haven't been reduced to a madman. He stopped looking around as he gave a self-deprecating chuckle. At this moment, one of the only few sailors he had leaned over and asked reverently, "Your Grace, where are we setting course for this time?" Alger surveyed his surroundings and said in calm voice, "Pursue the listener from the Aurora Order." The storm subsided as mist emanated on a strange sailboat with cannons on board. An 8 or 9-year-old boy with soft yellow hair was looking at pirates around him in fear. They were disorderly. Some enjoyed barrels of beer, some swung around with ropes, others mocked each other, and some even fought with their fists. He turned to look at a black-robed man standing in the shadows. He suppressed his voice and asked, "Father, where are we going?" 5 days ago was his first time seeing his father, a father who proclaimed to be an adventurer. If not for the oil painting his late mother left him that confirmed his father's identity and the fact that the orphanage had opened its doors to him, he was absolutely unwilling to leave his hometown and follow his only kin, who was also nearly a stranger. The man in the shadows lowered his head and looked at his son. With an amiable expression, he answered, "Jack, in bringing you to a holy place, a holy residence where the Creator once lived, is that the kingdom of God? We mortals can only enter by winning his grace." Jack had been well educated by his mother and knew this much. He was both surprised and fearful about the matter. Standing in the shadows, the man had an unforgettable jawline, as though he was a sculpture chiseled by the best artisan. He placed his hand to his ear and made a listening pose. He replied in a tone that sounded like sleep-talking, "Jack, mortals are a wrong concept. The Creator created this world and he is everywhere. He exists in every living being. Therefore, all beings have godhood. Once the godhood attains a particular level, they can become an angel. The 7 fake gods at present are only powerful angels. Look, I can now hear the teachings of the Creator. Ah, how extraordinary is this revelation! Life is only a tour of the spirit. When the spirit is sufficiently potent and resilient, we can find our godhood and fuse with even more godhoods." Jack could not understand the complicated description. He shook his head and asked another question he previously did not have the chance to. "Father, I heard from Mother that after the Creator created this world, he split into all beings and does not exist in actuality. Then why does his holy residence exist?" As a 7 to 8-year-old child, he was logical. The man with the chiseled face was taken aback. He turned his head away as though he was listening to more murmurings. Suddenly, he slumped down, knees on the deck. His exposed skin protruded black shards. He clenched his head with both hands as his expression warped, and he shouted in extreme pain, "They are lying." After lunch, having had old Neil promise him that he would bring him to the underground market the next time he went, Klein slowly returned to the Blackthorn Security Company. He chose the 2 options of reading the documents in the staff office and practicing his abilities, or take the opportunity to go out and act as a seer in the divination club before Captain Dunn stopped him. However, before he could make the decision, he saw Dunn Smith walk in. He was dressed in the usual black windbreaker and have top hat. "Captain, any updates?" Klein thought of the whereabouts of the Antigonus family's notebook as he asked with concern, without showing any signs of fatigue in his gray eyes. Dunn said, "The facts have corroborated that the Antigonus family's notebook is in Ray Bieber's hands. However, he has vanished completely. I have already informed the various Nighthawk teams of this matter through a telegram. They were requested to pay attention to the various piers and steam locomotive stations. The first batch of printed portraits was mailed out yesterday afternoon and will be printed in various major newspapers. How nice it would be if there were phones, fax machines, surveillance cameras, and big data. What a pity. I know how to use all of them and even understand a little of the logic behind it." Klein exhaled silently, "But regardless, we can consider ourselves as having found the notebook, and this is all thanks to you, of course. It still needs another round of confirmations. I have already sent a telegram to the Backlund Diocese requesting them to escort sealed artifact 2-049 here. It was once a dangerous item of the Antigonus family. It can help us know if Ray Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family. A grade 2 sealed artifact. Dangerous. They can be used with care and moderation." Klein had originally wanted to ask about the sealed artifact, its special abilities, and the danger it posed out of curiosity, but he instantly recalled that he lacked the necessary clearance. He had no choice but to give up. "May Goddess bless us." Klein tapped 4 spots on his chest, forming the sign of the full moon. Dunn pushed open the door to his office and said with a slight nod, "The Goddess has always been protecting us, Klein. If you had not chosen Seer, you would be a formal member after this matter is verified. You could have chosen Sleepless, but pity. To be frank, I'm still puzzled over your choice. Although Corpse Collector is quite off-putting, you have seen Daily as well. You should know that spirit mediums vary in strength. As for Mystery Priors, they're a good choice too. At the very least, you have Old Neil as a role model, so he will make sure the risk of losing control is minimized with regards to this question." Klein had prepared an answer from the beginning. He just never had a chance to use it since Dunn did not ask. He was only able to answer in passing. He organized his words and said, "My considerations stem from the fact that Seers and Mystery Priors are considered Beyonders with a support role. They do not need to always face enemies, for that's too dangerous, and both you and Old Neil said that in the domain of mystery and Beyonders, curiosity and experimentation usually brings about terrifying outcomes. Describing Mystery Priors as prying mysteries made me worried. So, as you know, I was only an ordinary graduate not long ago. A lack of guts is the only reason I made such a choice. I have to say that this is a very reasonable answer that goes beyond my expectations." Dunn massaged his temples and chuckled. He turned halfway as his gray eyes sized up Klein. "Continue going out for now. Do not limit yourself to the paths leading from Welch's Place to Iron Cross Street. Perhaps you might sense the notebook and help us confirm Ray Bieber's location." "All right." Klein realized that he no longer need to be in a dilemma. He bade Dunn farewell and turned around, his heart beginning to count. 3, 2. "Hold on," shouted Dunn. Klein turned his head and smiled. "Captain, is there anything else?" Dunn coughed slightly and said, "Well, support Beyonders have to fight their enemies from time to time. Although Seers sound like they can avoid such battles, they are not to be ignored. You have to maintain your shooting skills and work on increasing your strength. This is what I'm working hard towards." Klein pointed outside. "I'll be leaving." "All right." Wait a moment." Dunn shouted for him once more. As he pondered, he said, "Perhaps I have to consider hiring a combat trainer for you. Of course, this matter is under the premise that you become a formal member." Klein responded tersely before asking carefully, "Captain, is there anything else?" "No." Seeing Klein's unbelieving eyes, Dunn shook his head and smiled. He emphasized again, "Really, nothing." Only then did Klein walk past the partition divider. He bade farewell to Roseanne and Mrs. Oriana and headed to the shooting club for practice. With all of this done, he went to the divination club and saw the beautiful Angelica standing there reading newspapers leisurely. "Home." Klein silently read. With the cane in hand, he walked over and greeted with a smile, "Good afternoon, madam." "Angelica, good afternoon, Mr. Moretti." In no rush, Angelica put down her magazine. She stood up and said, "Not long after you left yesterday, Mr. Glassy came. He just recovered from a major illness." Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he smiled. "That sure is something worth celebrating." Upon hearing this, Angelica, who was secretly observing him, lowered her voice and asked out of curiosity, "Mr. Glassy said that you are a very, very, very magical doctor, are you?" "What?" Klein looked at the lady in front of him, suspecting if he was hearing things. What made him think him a doctor? "Even I do not know." Chapter 54. Upon seeing Klein's odd expression, Angelica immediately felt her beliefs waver. "Is that so? Mr. Glassy mentioned that you were able to tell of an ailment in his lungs simply from observation." Her voice softened until she finally shut up. Observation? A dark glabella. Klein was instantly enlightened as he shook his head with a chortle. I believe Mr. Glassy was mistaken. He was planning on being perfunctory. But after recalling that no one sought his divination services the entire afternoon yesterday, his mind whirled. It affected his goal of acting as a seer, so he explained, it's actually a form of divination. Divination? But Mr. Glassy only mentioned that you observed his face. That's also considered divination? Asked Angelica in shock and doubt. Klein smiled, composed. As a member of the divination club, you should know about palm reading, right? Palm reading was not patented by the Footaholic Empire. Even on Earth, India and old Europe had developed similar principles, much less in a world with beyonder powers. I know about it, but it seems you did not read his palm? Were you observing him in secret? Asked Angelica curiously. I was using face reading. Klein cooked up a lie. Its principles aren't very different from palm reading at a fundamental level, really? Angelica's eyes were filled with disbelief. In order to develop his career as a seer, Klein chuckled. He pretended to be in thought as he tapped his glabella twice. He focused his eyes and Angelica's aura presented itself. Her head was purple. Her limbs were red, her throat was blue. There was no problems with her health except for some colors being duller. However, that was a manifestation of ordinary fatigue. Klein then looked at her emotions. She saw orange mixed in with some red and blue. It also meant warmth coupled with some excitement and thought, thankfully. After realizing that there was nothing abnormal about her, Klein planned on deactivating his spirit vision, but it was at that moment when he suddenly saw rich darkness hidden in the depths of her emotional colors. Furthermore, she is lacking a little of Wittian eagerness to improve. Klein nodded while in thought. Mr. Moretti, were you reading my face? Seeing the young gentleman in black in front of her turned silent abruptly while seriously sizing her up, Angelica keenly noticed something. She asked in a half-curious and half-worried manner. Klein did not immediately reply. Instead, he tapped his glabella lightly as he wore a look of scrutiny. Just as Angelica was feeling unease, he said warmly, Madam Angelica, there are some sorrows and pains which you should not seal in your heart. Angelica's eyes widened as her mouth turned agape. However, she did not say a word. She looked at Klein in his half-top hat with an apparent scholarly bearing. He heard him use a deep, comforting and warm voice to say, you need to either go mountain climbing, a game of tennis, or perform a tragic play to exhaust your body due to exercising. Let your tears flow down uninhibited, then cry and scream. Express all those emotions. That will be very helpful to your health. The moment those words entered her ears, Angelica felt like she had transformed into a statue. She stood there motionless. She tried hard to blink as she lowered her head in a fluster, saying deeply, thank you for your suggestion. It seems like there are many members here today? Klein did not continue. As though he had not done any divinations prior, he turned to his side and looked to the meeting room at the end of the corridor. Sunday afternoon. At least 50 members. Angelica's voice sounded a little hoarse. She only mentioned the key terms. She paused as her vocal pace gradually returned to normal. Do you want tea or coffee? Black tea. Klein nodded slightly. He politely took off his hat and slowly walked to the meeting room. Only when he vanished behind the door did Angelica exhale slowly. The divination club's meeting room was very large. It was nearly twice the size of Klein's high school classroom. In the past, only 5 or 6 members would be present, making it look extremely empty. Now, there were dozens of fortune tellers sitting in different spots. They filled up most of the room. Sunlight shone into the room through the few oriel windows. The members were either discussing softly among themselves or asking Hans Vincent questions. Otherwise, they were practicing and attempting divination or drinking coffee and reading newspapers by themselves. Such a scene made Klein feel like he was back to his schooling days on Earth. The difference was that it was noisier and more rowdy back then. Without the tranquility of the meeting room, he looked around, but he didn't see familiar faces like Glassy or Edward Steve, so he casually picked up a divination textbook, found a corner, and started flipping through it leisurely. Very soon, Angelica came in with a cup of tea and left it on the table before Klein. As she was leaving quietly, she suddenly saw Mr. Moretti take out an exquisite-looking silver chain from his left sleeve. There was a chunk of pure topaz hanging on the silver chain. What is he doing? Angelica slowed down subconsciously and focused her gaze at Klein. Klein held the silver chain with his left hand and allowed the topaz to hang above the black tea, just short of touching the surface of the liquid. With a serene expression, he half closed his eyes and the atmosphere around him suddenly turned quiet. The topaz started moving slightly. along with the special-looking silver chain in a clockwise direction. Upon seeing this, Angelica found Mr. Moretti extremely mysterious. "The black tea you provide is great," Klein said softly after he opened his eyes with a smile. His actions were intentionally done for Angelica to see. If he wanted people to select him for his divination services, Angelica's recommendation was a very crucial factor. Since he wanted to act as a seer, Klein no longer had any reservations. He completely personified the identity. "Yes, Mr. Vanis is very picky about the quality of tea," Angelica said, stunned. Klein put away his spirit pendulum by winding it properly. Then he raised the white porcelain cup with floral design. With a smile, he gestured politely at her with his cup. Angelica returned to the reception hall. But she no longer had the mood to read magazines. She sat there, gazing into the distance. It was a wonder what she was thinking about. This continued until there were knocks on the door. She jolted awake and hurriedly looked at the entrance, only to see a lady dressed in a light blue dress. The lady took off her veiled hat with a powder blue ribbon. She looked calm and melancholic. "Good afternoon, esteemed lady. Would you like to join the divination club? Or are you looking for a divination?" Angelica asked like clockwork. "I want a divination." The lady had a beautiful pair of eyes hidden with sorrow, and she bit her lower lip as she spoke. Angelica guided her to the sofa and explained to her how the divination club worked in detail. She picked up an album and handed it over. "You can pick anyone." In her low spirits, the lady flipped through the album seriously. As there were too many club members there that day, there were too many choices. It left her quite upset. "Can you recommend one?" From these few pages, she pointed at the middle section of the album, omitting the fortune tellers priced above 2 soldi and those below 4 pence. Angelica took the album and looked at it for a few minutes. She deliberated her words before saying, "I suggest this gentleman." The lady, who looked uneasy, took a glance and realized that it was a fortune teller named Klein Moretti. "Mr. Moretti just joined the club. Is his divination reliable?" she asked worriedly. Angelica nodded with great affirmation. "Another member of the club and I are certain that Mr. Moretti is an outstanding fortune teller. If it wasn't for his just joining the club, he wouldn't take such low fees." "I understand." The depressed girl nodded. "I'll pick Mr. Moretti for a divination then." "All right, please hold on for a second." Angelica took the album and walked towards the meeting room. She came next to Klein and said with a suppressed voice, "Mr. Moretti, someone wants you to divine for them. Which room would you like to use?" That was effective. "My first business is here." Klein put down his teacup and nodded calmly as he said, "Topaz room." "All right." Angelica walked slowly ahead of him and led him to Topaz room before opening its wooden door. Klein sat behind the table that had various divination tools on it. He waited less than a minute before he saw a woman in a light blue dress walk in. She looked down and melancholic, seizing the opportunity when she was closing the door. He tapped his glabella twice. "The yellow color in her stomach seems a little dull. The dark color of her emotions is very heavy, mainly worry and anxiety." Klein looked her over carefully and leaned backwards. He then lifted his hand to cut off his spiritual vision. "Good day, Mr. Moretti." The woman in the light blue dress sat down. "Good afternoon. How may I address you?" Klein asked politely, not carrying much hope of getting an answer. As a keyboard warrior, he knew that many people were not willing to use their real names during divination. "You can call me Anna." The girl put her veiled cap aside. She looked at Klein with mixed anticipation and doubt and said, "I would like to divine about my fiancé's situation. He traveled to the southern continent in March for a business deal. He sent me and his family a telegram last month on the 3rd, saying that he was going to set sail and return, but he did not return after 20 days. At first, I believed that his delay was due to the berserk ocean's weather, but as of today, it has been more than a month. The ship he took, the Alfalfa, still hasn't arrived at Enmad Harbor. The ocean that separated the northern and southern continent was called the Berserk Ocean. It was well known for natural calamities and its countless dangerous currents. If it was not for Emperor Roselle, who sent men to discover a few safer sailing routes, countries in the northern continent would still have yet to enter the age of colonization, let alone lay an underwater cable to complete a transoceanic telegraph. Klein looked at his very first client of his career as a seer and asked carefully, "Which divination method do you wish to use?" Chapter 55. Anna, with her beautiful eyes, hesitated for more than 10 seconds. "You can choose any type that you believe will be accurate. You are the fortune teller. While I'm not, of course, apart from cards, including tarot, I have also attempted studying them at home. I always felt they were more like toys or a game." Klein thought for a moment, his wrists leaning on the edge of the table. He steepled his hands before his face, his gaze peaceful. He said softly, "Then we shall use the astrolabe." He pointed to a fountain pen and stack of white paper on the table and said, Write down the name of your fiancé as well as his facial features, address, and date of birth. It would be even better if you can remember the specific time he was born. From her clothes, makeup, and demeanor, Klein did not believe that she was illiterate. Anna did not reply. She extended her hand and took a piece of paper. She lifted the pen and dipped it in some ink. She started writing, pausing occasionally to think. 2 minutes later, she pushed the paper toward Klein. Klein received it and turned it around. The information on the paper read, Joyce Meyer, September 15, 1323, 2:00 p.m., Tingen City, Eastborough, 8 Stevens Street, short blonde hair, aquiline nose. With just a short glance, Klein quickly calculated the person's spiritual number, 156 in the study of spirit numerology in mysticism. Adding the numbers of the day the person was born was called their birthday path number, affecting the person's life before 27. Birth month path number calculated by adding the numbers in their birth month affected their life from 27 to 54 years old, while the birth year path number calculating the numbers in their birth year affected their life from 54 years old onward. It was July 1349. So Joyce was not yet 27. Thus, Klein immediately calculated the birthday path number. The number 6 represented a balanced and harmonious life, with a heart for giving and a decent marriage or engagement following. This, he quickly calculated Joyce's year path number. The so-called year path number was calculated by replacing the birth year with the current year. The digits were then added with his birthday path number and birth month path number to get a general understanding of the person's luck for the year 134917, 178. 89 birth month path number 6 birthday path number 23, 235. His year path number is 5. Signifying that he would meet with change and accident. He would be required to take certain risks. Klein made a silent judgment after consolidating the facts. He confirmed that the information Anna gave was correct. He retracted his gaze from the paper and turned it toward Anna. Mr. Meyer set off on his journey on the 3rd of June? If he did not lie, that is indeed the case. Anna bit her lips. All right, Klein took the fountain pen and made a note of that. He looked at Anna with his dark brown eyes and said gently, I will begin creating the astrolabe now. I will need some time and absolute silence. Do you mind waiting outside? Angelica will provide you with a cup of tea or coffee. All right, Anna knew that some fortune tellers had their eccentricities, so she stood up unsurprised. She took her hat with the light blue ribbon and left the topaz room. Klein locked the door and returned to the table. He followed the information and set up the astrolabe, including elements such as his horoscope and locations of the corresponding planets and stars. Throughout the entire process, he did not open the astromancy manual. He completed the setup based on his memory. Over the past few days of his mysticism studies, Klein realized that he could easily grasp and understand anything about divination, quickly turning it into instinct. Perhaps that is the ability of a seer. He completed the astrolabe and felt satisfied. He felt as though his body, heart, and soul had relaxed considerably as he looked at the outcome. He followed the path of the horoscopes and planets, as well as other supporting details to roughly deduce that Joyce Meyer had met with an accident but would ultimately survive it. At this point, the divination was technically complete, but Klein wanted to pay much attention to his first business transaction. He hoped to build a reputation to aid in acquiring future jobs. He picked up the pen and wrote a sentence in Hermes, Joyce Meyer's current situation. He read the sentence silently and memorized the information on the piece of paper, repeating it again and again. After 7 times, Klein grabbed the piece of paper and leaned back into his chair. He imagined the sphere of light and his eyes became darker, allowing him to quickly enter a state of cogitation. The surroundings took on an ethereal quality, a formless, boundless fog stretched above him. Klein recalled the contents of the piece of paper, then relaxed. He fell into a deep sleep in this state. He was using a dream divination technique. Repeating the question, remembering the details, and then allowing his astral projection to roam the spirit world in a dream would allow him to gain revelations. Ordinary people also had this sort of experience sometimes, but it was hard for them to recall as the signs in their dreams were more complicated and garbled. A seer would not have such a problem, for they could see the images directly. The surroundings began to turn hazy as Klein turned half asleep. In the contorted fantasy, he saw a blond young man with an aquiline nose. He was swimming frantically in a sea of blood, nearly engulfed by the waves, but in the end, he managed to escape to shore. The image shattered and changed. Klein saw a blue house with a toy windmill at the door. That blonde young man was entering the house slowly, seemingly in joy. At this moment, the image changed once again. Klein realized that he was inside a magnificent palace. The walls were destroyed and damaged beyond repair. Moss and weeds grew in multiple areas. Through the holes in the walls, he could see a mountain peak and clouds clinging close to it outside. Atop the palace was a huge throne carved out of stone. It was adorned with dull gemstones and gold. It looked as though it was not prepared for a human. This giant throne was empty and mottled, as if it had been washed over by the ages. Klein looked around in confusion. He did not understand why he would be dreaming of such a scene. His turbid mind turned sharp as he subconsciously walked out of the palace in an attempt to ascertain where he was. Suddenly, he felt a gaze fall upon him. It was a gaze that came from behind. Klein suddenly turned around and stared towards the giant stone throne, only to see a scene of countless transparent maggots slowly twitching and growing. Klein gasped. He opened his eyes and woke up from his dream. Crystal balls, tarot cards, and the prepared astrolabe entered his vision. Reality quickly replaced fantasy. The initial dream was the result of the divination, but what was the later dream about? It seemed to be targeted at me. Klein put the piece of paper down. He rubbed his temples and contemplated. He could confirm that it wasn't his fear projecting itself in the form of a dream, for he was doing the divination himself. A palace not meant for humans on the peak of a mountain, the silent stare, the contorted and weird scene of the maggots. Klein silently guessed as he recalled, has the luck enhancement ritual communicated with that existence? Or is it a result of the Antigonus family's notebook? Right, that notebook mentioned the nation of the Evernight in the Hornacis mountain range. The palace in the dream was on a mountain peak. He made a simple deduction and was relieved that he had picked seer. According to Old Neil, mystery priors could also divine through dreams, but they weren't as effective as a seer. Sigh, it sure isn't letting me go. All I can hope for is the early capture of Ray Bieber. Klein collected himself and picked up the piece of paper with the diagram of the astrolabe. He slowly walked towards the door. He opened the door and headed to the reception area. He saw Anna looking out the window, completely ignoring her cup of black tea. Ah, Mr. Moretti, is there a result? She saw Klein in her peripheral vision and stood up in a hurry. Klein did not answer her immediately. Instead, he asked, according to the revelation he received from the dream, does your house, or Mr. Meyer's house, have a toy windmill? Anna's eyes widened, shocked into silence. After a while, she muttered, that was a present he gave me. It is by the door at my house. How did you know that? See, can this be divined? Klein smiled and spoke with a gentle tone. Congratulations, Miss Anna. Mr. Joyce Meyer is currently a guest at your place. If you rush back, you should still be able to meet him. He just experienced a calamity, an unimaginably painful journey. What he needs now are not questions, but consolation and a warm hug. Really? Anna asked in disbelief. The fortune-tellers she knew would never speak with such certainty or give such firm conclusions. You will know if you go back immediately, Klein replied with a gentle tone and smile. Oh, Lord of Steam, is that true? Has my poor Joyce returned? Are you certain? No, I cannot believe it. Anna froze for a moment and said a few delirious words. She took out a one-solly note from her purse and did not wait for Klein to give her the change. She broke into a small jog as she left the divination club, taking a carriage back home. Does this include my tip? Klein looked at the note and shook his head with a laugh. A two-wheeled carriage steered quickly across the streets and entered East Borough. Anna watched the streets sweeping past her, feeling a mixture of unease, anticipation, and fear. It did not take long before the toy windmill entered her field of vision. She got off the carriage, showing no care for her bearing. She staggered quickly towards the door and rang the doorbell. The door creaked open, revealing a blond young man dressed in a black formal suit. He was haggard, but his eyes carried a glint of joy. He had an aquiline nose. I thought that I would miss you today, Joyce said with a smile. Oh, exalted Steam, you really are back. Anna rubbed her eyes, exclaiming in pleasant surprise, what the fortune-teller said was true. No, that was a real seer. It was simply fascinating. Thoughts welled in her mind as Anna pounced forward with tears in her eyes and gave her fiancé a warm hug. The two of them hugged silently outside the grayish-blue house. The toy windmill turned slowly, seemingly tossing all their difficulties far away.